This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has recently concluded a four-nation tour of Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Nepal. Wang Yi's unannounced stopovers in Afghanistan and India were China's first high-level visits to the two countries since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan last year and the clashes on the China-India border nearly 2 years ago. So what were the reasons for the pack of South Asia tour at this time? And more importantly, what were the outcomes? To help us unpack the week-long diplomatic tour, I'm joined by Atul Aneja, editor of India Narrative, Muhammad Zamir Asadi, correspondent at the Independent News Pakistan, and Tangen, an independent current affairs commentator, and Wang Jin, associate professor at the Northwest University of China. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. And I will start with you. You know, a week's time, four nations, neighboring countries here. So what do you make of the tour?
Well, in the midst of the chaos being created in Ukraine, and it seems the U.S. continues to pile pressure on China with more legislation, more blacklists, etc. There has been some reprieve in terms of some of the economic sanctions have been taken off, but China is very interested in making sure that its backyard is in fact in order. I mean, things are moving away from globalism, but they're heating up in terms of regionalism. So this was all about RCEP. Belt and Road Initiative, and going and making sure that these countries understood that there was a common goal.
The regionalism, regional stability, peace, and Wang Jin. So what do you see as the significance of the foreign minister's recent trip?
Yes, I think Wang Yi's trip is very important because actually, if we look at what has been happening during the past year, a lot of the changes, a lot of transformations erupted in the South Asia and Central Asia. So a lot of people expected what China's role could be. And also, meanwhile, we cannot forget that there was a lot of discussions, or even some of discussions are negative, or some of the suspicions about China's possible geostrategic measures in this region. So that's why Wang Yi's visit is very important. For example, his visit to Afghanistan, his visit to Pakistan, his visit to India, and also Nepal helped to show that what China wants and what China could do with the regional countries. So this is a very important visit. This shows China's international image, and also helped to understand China's policies in the region.
Mm-hmm. Well, Atul, obviously there are people would say surprise stopovers in Afghanistan and India. So why the surprise?
Well, I think the visit to India was kept under wraps because either side to raise expectations too much. There's a context to that. That is, the relationship was literally frozen for the last years. There were official level contacts, there were military level contacts, but frankly, there were no political contacts. So therefore, this was the first big political contact which promises a thaw between the relationship in the two countries. Obviously, the two relationships wanted to keep it quiet till it really happens, test each other out, and see where we can go from there. So I think that's the reason why it was unannounced. But I think the visit was exceptionally significant. I can say for the India leg of the visit, because there's an invitation from Foreign Minister and State Councillor Wang Yi to the National Security Advisor of India to start the boundary talks. Both these officials are special representatives of their countries on resolving the boundary issue. So that invitation is a way forward. There's only one stumbling block which has come, which is that the standoff at the borders, both sides need to restore the status quo ante as it existed before the standoff. I think once we accomplish that, there are major breakthroughs ahead. I think it will lead finally to the BRICS summit, which will be held in China, where the real occasion will be when President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi meet again. And that will be the full revival of the relationship. But I think this was a very important milestone in setting the ground, the foundations for that possible summit.
Yeah, laying the foundations for further, higher level contact between the two countries. And of course, Wang Yi's trip started with Pakistan, and he attended for the first time the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. So, Mr. Asadi, I want to have you here to tell us, what are the highlights? What are the highlights of Wang Yi's trip in Pakistan with the meeting? And is China seeking solidarity with the Muslim world?
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on this very important issue. Chinese FM, Mr. Wang Yi, was on a very important visit to Pakistan in the last week, and Pakistan have highest regard of the visit. Pakistan was always looking forward towards this important visit because Pakistan was thinking to have a very comprehensive kind of negotiations in the upcoming phase of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. But right now, Chinese FM visit to Pakistan at the eve of the OIC high-level summit of the Foreign Ministers Council in Pakistan, it was highly appreciated, it was highly welcomed in Pakistan, and the speech delivered by Mr. Wang Yi at the OIC session, it was highly welcomed and highly taken in Pakistan, and the speech tells us that China and the Muslim countries and especially Pakistan, they share their common interest, they share their common agenda of the development, and both sides like China, like Islamic countries and especially Pakistan, they share their values of the development, and they are ready to go forward and to bolster the relationship for the goodwill of the people on both sides. So I think the Chinese FM visit to Pakistan marks the highest importance for both sides, and Pakistan is very thankful to China that the Chinese FM was here, and Pakistan have gained maximum and huge benefits from this visit, which will be witnessed in the coming weeks.
Wang Jin, obviously, Afghanistan, as we said, one of the surprises probably. So China is one of the countries that heavily involved in this humanitarian crisis to help resolve that. And some say, is this somehow associated with the upcoming meeting of foreign ministers of the neighboring countries of Afghanistan in China?
I think we have to know that China always, as you say, China always focus on what is happening in Afghanistan. China will always cared about the humanitarian crisis in this country. I think Wang Yi's visit to Afghanistan, although it is a surprise, the so-called stopover, but I think if we look at what is happening there, also Wang Yi received the very welcome of the Afghan interim government, and also Wang Yi put forward the very important foundations of the future cooperation, for example, 3 respects and 3 levels of Chinese policy to Afghanistan. This sets the very important foundation for the future bilateral ties between China and Afghan people. So I think it might be the preparation for the future bilateral ties, and also it also strengthens the major countries, especially the regional countries, cooperation to help the Afghan people to help pacify the humanitarian crisis there. So this is why I call it a very important visit, and also it is very meaningful and very significant.
Well, back to you here. Speak of Foreign Minister Wang Yi's trip to India. You mentioned that it is a significant trip over there. Can we see that as the beginning of the thawing of this rather cold relationship? The bilateral relationship took a hit, but 2 years ago because of the border clashes. So now we are seeing, more or less, the relationship is getting better. Let's say.
I would say it is exceptionally promising, this visit, because we are now on the cusp of normalization. It can lead to normalization of the relationship. It has the potential of doing so. There is only one issue, which I think the Indian side, in its friendly conversation with Wang Yi, but also conveyed to the Chinese side, that we need to restore the status quo ante. That has to happen. And the moment that happens, then in a way the floodgates open. Then there are visits lined up, as I said. The special representatives have already, Foreign Minister Wang Yi has already invited. That invitation is there. And then we will have the visit of the Prime Minister, most probably, which is when China hosts the BRICS summit. So this is, we're at an inflection point, frankly, Chingu. And this visit can very much lead to that revival or rebooting of the relationship, which has been virtually frozen for the last 2 years. And I think it's a great thing for personally, I think it's excellent if that happens, given the broader context in which we are having this conversation. The Ukraine situation, the way the West has gone after both Russia and pressurizing China, and including India, we are facing a big pressure from them as well, because we did not take a pro-Western position, but we adopted a position of neutrality and advocated that this problem needs to be resolved through dialogue. But that has been too much. It's not been taken well. So I think there's a common cause between Eurasian countries here, especially India, China, and Russia. So there's a context for us to bond. But there's only one obstacle, as I said. Once we resolve that obstacle, it is not resolution of the entire border issue. It is very specific and precise. It is the unloosening of the standoff and troops going back to the positions they were before April 2020 or May 2020. And the moment that happens, then we can frankly take advantage of a new geopolitical context which is emerging, and where we can see within the BRICS the huge potential of the RIC, Russia, India, China relationship, as one of the core of the BRICS itself. It has economic potential. It has in many other ways.
Yes.
It has geopolitical weight. We have markets together. And 3 nuclear-powered countries, frankly. And so there is both geo-economic and geopolitical power which comes together with the RIC within the BRICS. That is not to undermine the importance of Brazil or South Africa. But all I'm saying is this visit can lead to big possibilities. And therefore, it has been taken very, very well in India. It's been welcomed in India. Now we're waiting for the next step.
And obviously, as the Foreign Minister Wang Yi mentioned, the two countries, they have, from this, the big picture, they should see each other as opportunities, see each other as mutually enhancing each other, because they are complementary in the sense. But at the same time, you see, Wang Yi make it very clear, like China does not seek a unipolar Asia. China respects India's traditional role in the region. But over the border issue, obviously, there's still some difference. It seems to me, the Chinese side is basically the idea is like our relationship should not be defined by these border disputes. The Indian side is more like, we should solve this issue, and then we can move forward.
Well, yeah, there are always going to be staking out different positions based on, popularity and things like that. People expect different things. But, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is Ukraine. Quite frankly, this is an opportunity, and right now China is trying to discover this is a window and it can look through, or a door that both sides can walk through. And that's really, really important to know the extent to how India. Now, on the Indian press right now, they're absolutely death on the United States. They are inviting guests who they used to be very friendly to, and they're dressing them down for being arrogant and telling India what to do. So you see this kind of reaction to the face of colonialism. And this is something that can unite a lot of countries throughout Asia, because they've all felt it at one time or another. So we'll have to see how far it goes. Right now, the U.S. is not being very, they're being ham-handed in the way that they're trying to handle these things. They're saying, you're either with me or against me. They do not respect the fact that the majority of people in the world and the greatest amount of land mass is not with them. They're trying to make sure and pressure everybody, and that's not working out very well. But the other 3 countries, I think they represented, issues. Nepal, for instance, they had signed an agreement with the U.S. Opportunities Challenge Cooperation or something like this, and it was $500 million. Now, China obviously sees this as the U.S. trying to get at a back door to China.
Concern, yes.
Yes, and then obviously in Pakistan the no confidence vote for Imran Khan, and in Afghanistan it's just you have 3/4 of their people who are facing starvation or potential they're food insecure at this point, and it's a humanitarian crisis. So China's answering the challenges as they're coming.
Well, Mr. Assadi, we mentioned about this larger background of the Ukrainian crisis. We see that China, India, and Pakistan and the Islamic world basically choose to stay neutral. Do you see, somehow, because of the Ukrainian crisis, all the rest of the countries beyond the West are somehow getting united?
Yes, sir, definitely. Pakistan, especially, it is the very first time that at the international level that Pakistan have stayed neutral, and Pakistan have, commented that although peace is very important and the peace should be established, peace should be maintained between Ukraine and Russia, but there are the certain complications which have led to the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. So I think it is the right time when you can see Pakistan, you can see India and the other Islamic countries, they have not taken the side of the United States or the European bloc, which have although pressurized a lot to take the side of the Ukraine and to condemn the attitude of the Russians. But I think all of these independent countries, the Organization of Islamic Countries, Pakistan and other countries, they have the right and they have their choice to choose their path, and I think it is very important, and it is the dire need of the time that these countries should should evolve a kind of a common approach and should speak unitedly against the role of the Americans or the Europeans or the NATO in Ukraine. And I think when these countries will evolve a common approach or common agenda towards the peace, I think then the Russia-Ukraine conflict will also be having more chances of peace as soon as possible. So I think that the Pakistan and the other countries have taken a very right stance. And in Pakistan, when Mr. Wang Yi met with the Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan, our Army Chief have appreciated the stance of China about Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Army Chief have commented that Pakistan appreciates that how China has maintained its position and how China is trying its best at regional, at the international level to sort out a peaceful way of the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. And same is the position with our civil leadership. Mr. Wang Yi and our Prime Minister Imran Khan, they met and they discussed about the situation of the Ukraine, and the Prime Minister Imran Khan have also appreciated the stance of China and commented that China has taken a very bold and very brave stance, a very fair approach towards the conflict, and Pakistan is also standing and having the same stance of China regarding Ukraine and the Russia conflict.
Well, Wang Jin, obviously, if you look at China-India relationship, in particular against the backdrop of the Ukrainian crisis, they are in a very similar situation, maybe for different reasons, but they are all, both of the countries, and including Pakistan, despite all the differences, they are taking a similar position, that is a neutral position on the Ukrainian crisis. And that somehow played a role, probably, in Wang Yi's decision to visit India, for example, that might prompt the two countries to, highlight and to see the big picture, the common interests of the two countries. But still, are you, if you're looking forward, and there's an upcoming summit, like a BRIC summit this year in China, do you see, the border issue from the Chinese point of view? Will we be able to make some progress with the Indian side?
Yes, you are right. The border program are still there. Still actually, let's be frank, still actually influence the bilateral ties between China and India. Because we cannot forget that in the modern world, the border issue between any two states, they actually influence the bilateral ties, or even sometimes prevail the ties, because the border issue not related to the border itself, but related to the national reputation. to how to define your national identity. So this is a very big issue. But meanwhile, we cannot forget that China and India are neighbors. When we're talking about neighbors, especially the countries that have a long history of friendship and partnership, which means that there were usually some kind of divisions. Divisions are very natural, and the disagreements are natural, and even the clashes are natural. So that's why I think China and India should find a way out together, stand together to find a way out to solve the territorial issues, because the territorial issues cannot be the forever obstacle for the two countries, because the two countries' cooperation can lead, as you say, to lead to a better future, to the more and more broader future for both of us. But when we just look at the very minor or very, very small part of the border issue, it can just become the obstacle for both of us. So that is why I think, yes, we are confident, and also I think the India is confident we should stand together to find a way out altogether.
Back to your point, like China, India, in this Ukraine crisis, you see the West, in particular the US, is trying to pressure the two countries, basically to side with them, to take their stance. Of course, for the global South, usually people would see not only this Ukrainian crisis, but also people see, there's Islam, there's a Iraqi invasion, also a similar situation, and at that time. India and China was not required to take a stance probably against the U.S. And also they say now you need probably to impose sanctions on Russia or don't buy this and that from Russia. Do you think that will work? China or India will make some concessions somehow in order to maintain the relationship with the U.S. or the West?
Well, over here in India, we are very clear that we are no longer living in a unipolar world as it existed after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That era is gone. Power has diffused, and we have a multipolar world where US is not the only pole, but one of the poles of the multipolar world. China, India, Russia, European Union, maybe South America. These are the various poles power has diffused into. And therefore, India will work with the multipolar world. It would like to work with the United States for sure, but simultaneously, it has a strategic autonomy to deal with China, with Russia, and other partners of the various poles. So I don't think we are in an era where we're going to listen to a dictate coming from United States. That's gone. But we will work with, we would hope that that kind of pressure is not imposed on us, and that is India and United States have been working harmoniously, can work harmoniously. But if the United States chooses to, in a zero-sum approach, that either you are with us or against us, then obviously we will exercise a strategic autonomy and take a position which will suit our national interests, which means a deep engagement with other poles of the international system. It can't be your way or the highway. That civilizational India will not accept. It's not going to happen that way. Mm. So we do hope that better sense prevails in the United States and they accept the reality of our present day world and not adopt a position where it is them and the rest. So I think that's something which needs to be worked out. And that's the reason why I think countries like India, Russia, China need to work together to stand firm, to negotiate and talk with the West from a position of strength and come to a position where all the players in the international system accept the new realities.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, Anna, both China and India, they are great civilizations. They cherish very much independence in their decision-making in terms of their foreign policy. And of course, on one hand is their national interests. On the other hand, they want to solve this problem in a peaceful manner. No dispute about that. Do you think the U.S. will be successful somehow in pressuring the countries, basically like you are siding with us, or you will be the opposite of us?
Well, at this point, the U.S. is as a tool set, pushing a zero-sum game. You're either with us or against us, and if you're against us, we're going to get you. We're going to take sanctions, maybe secondary sanctions. I mean, Washington is upset with the fact that they wouldn't condemn the things, that they stayed neutral, that they're doing oil deals with Russia. But there's no sensitivity on the U.S. side that...
How will that lead to? like, how will China and India react, probably,
Well, no, I mean, look, both of these countries suffered under colonialism. And they just do not want, as Atul just said, another master telling them what to do. And that is the surest way the U.S. can make sure that India just says, look, you and your Quad can go jump in the lake. We're not interested in dealing with you if you think you can dictate to us, just as China is not, as any other country. Russia is not interested anymore. And this is what I mean, and I think all the guests have mentioned, is that there's no more a unipolar world. The U.S. does not call the shots and everyone has to do it. And you can see that even with allies like Saudi Arabia and UAE. Both leaders refused to take Biden's phone calls. Can you imagine that happening 10 years ago? No.
Very difficult.
No. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So the reality has come. The question is, does the U.S. recognize the reality, or will they continue to push in a way that's actually against U.S. interests?
Wang Jian, Wang Yi's tour also, took him to Nepal. One important issue is really about, the perception, or let's say, there's like a 500 million U.S. grant to Nepal to support the infrastructure, they say. Some people, skeptics see that as a countermeasure against China's Belt and Road Initiative in that country. And so Wang Yi is worried, obviously, about the concern about independence of Nepal in terms of whether the country's affairs will be interfered from outside. What do you make of that?
That also shows China's cherish the relations with Nepal, just as China's cherishes the relations with other neighboring countries. But we know that there were some suspicions, or even some efforts that taken by some countries, some other countries, especially the Western countries, about China's Belt and Road Initiative, and even some of the promises made by some Western countries towards some Chinese neighboring countries, that I will give you this, I will give you that, maybe how about this, how about that, maybe next 5 years or next 10 years, this big amount of money. But I think that on the one hand, this may be a good thing for the related countries, because if the money just really came here, this infrastructure projects really came here, it's a good thing from the Western countries. But if we look at what is happening in Afghanistan, if we look at what is happening in Iraq, some promises from the Western countries are now become the empty words. So that's why I think for these neighboring countries, on the one hand, they have the freedom to seek the investment and the money from the Western countries. But on the other hand, I think they should realize or recognize that China is a real and truthful friend of them. And China's Belt and Road Initiative is really, really a big and good opportunity for them to develop themselves. So that's why I think Wang Yi has already expressed his idea and his opinion from China's stand view. Yes.
Right, and some would say there's a concern that whether the $500 million is a part of U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. We all know that is targeting China.
It's not hard. No, I mean the U.S. is looking at China and trying to dissect it and say, where is the weak points? Where can we put our pin in and create some trouble? Let's see if that 500 million actually materializes. But in the meantime, I mean, Wang Yi was talking about a rail link between China and Nepal. This is very important to a landlocked area that's basically, only connected to India. And also connecting up to the grid. Very important too, to have power, especially in days like these.
Yes, well, with that, we come to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qinduo. See you next time.